The inscription named the Door of Mher, or the Gate of Haldi, is unique since it represents the entire pantheon of the empire known to us as Urartu. The cuneiform writing indicates the names of all the gods and the number of bulls and rams prescribed to each god for performing sacrifices. In the ancient world, it was generally accepted that gods are also heavenly bodies. Even the popular name of this door, Agravakar, Ravenstone, is not accidental. The ancient priests also designated the constellation Raven in the sky as the messenger of the gods or the guardian of the gates of the underworld.
Ishpuini, the son of Zarduri, and Minua, the son of Ishpuini, built this door and established an order. Make a feast in the month of the god of the sun. Let 6 goats be sacrificed to the god Haldi as a burnt offering. 17 bulls, 34 rams be sacrificed to the god. Let 6 bulls, 12 rams be sacrificed to the god Tesheba. Let 4 bulls, 8 rams be sacrificed to the god Shivini.
In the Armenian highland, the kingdom of Van as an Armenian empire existed from the 9th century to the 7th century BC. The name of the kingdom Urartu was used only in Assyrian sources, while no such self-naming was attested in the Urartian texts. History has always been politicized and was falsified a lot of times. In Urartian texts, instead of Urartu, it is written Viainer Vanner, which is the plural form for the toponym Van. In Assyrian sources, this state was mentioned as Urartu. In the Bible, the Ararat kingdom, which in Sumerian texts was called Arata. In the Urartian texts that have already been studied and read, which are almost 3,000 years old, 70% of the vocabulary is identical to the words of the Armenian language. Pronouns, conjunctions, and adverbs are also Armenian. There is the trilingual Behistun inscription of the Achaemenid king Darius I, where the country of Armenia is called Armina in Old Persian, Urashtu in Babylonian, and Harminuea in Elamite. It is an obvious fact that in ancient times, the same country of Armenia was called both Urartu Urashtu and Armenia.
The founding king of Urartu is considered to be Zardur I, who ruled from 844 to 830 BC. Zardur I and his successors, kings Ishpuini, Minua, and Argis I, expanding the country's borders, made the Kingdom of Van one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world.
The rocky hill named Agravakar, Ravenstone, is located near Urartu's capital city, Tosp Van. The foot of the rock is 1,728 meters above sea level. The rock is 17 meters high, and the door with the inscription is about 5 meters high. The names of the gods in the pantheon and the numbers of goats, bulls, and rams intended to be sacrificed for them are carved on the facade of the rock, in the niche of man-made triple frame layer door. The measurements of the door show that it was built according to the golden section formula. This means that the golden section formula was used to determine the proportionality of the ratio of the width of the niche and the door, as well as the width and height of the door. And for the more ancient gates of the supreme deity Haldi, located in Ashotakert, the formula of the root of 3 was used, which is also obvious when determining the quantitative ratios of sacrifices.
In the cuneiform inscription, the Door of Mher, all the main gods of the pantheon are indicated, as well as grouped gods and shrines of lower status, and the number of sacrificial bulls and rams prescribed for them. It is interesting that each god, mentioned singularly and by his own name, is prescribed a certain number of sacrificial bulls and rams. However, the logic behind calculating the number of animals for sacrifices remained a mystery until 2008.
The inscription mentions that in honor of the supreme god Haldi, it is necessary to sacrifice 17 bulls and 34 rams. In the name of the god Tesheba, 6 bulls and 12 rams. And in the name of the god Shivini, 4 bulls and 8 rams. Thus, the prescribed number of sacrificial bulls for the 3 main gods, the Trinity, is 27, and of rams, 54, which resembles a geometric body. a cube, the volume of which is 27, and the surface area is 54. This means that it contains 27 small cubes, where the volume of each small cube is equal to 1 cubic unit. Here you have the idea of the triune deity of the Urartian pantheon, expressed by a geometric pattern. Another pattern. 36 bulls are specified to be sacrificed for the first 8 deities of the pantheon. The sum of the numbers from 1 to 8 is equal to 36. In the inscription, the total number of sacrificial bulls is set at 100 bulls. Why 100? To answer this, perhaps we need to turn to geometry again. At least how many cuts would be required for one large cube to be transformed into several regular cubes with a volume of 8, 27, and 64, where the volume of each smallest base unit cube is equal to 1 cubic unit? The sum of the cubes of 4 consecutive natural numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 is 100. 1 plus 8 plus 27 plus 64 is 100. This is the meaning of the geometric regularity of the number of sacrificial 100 bulls, which was used by the scientist priests of the Van kingdom. The sum of the centered hexagonal numbers of these 4 cubes is 64. In the cuneiform inscription, the Door of Mher, 64 sacrificial bulls out of a total of 100 are intended for 35 male gods mentioned singularly and by their own names, and 36 sacrificial bulls are provided for other minor deities. If we have cubes with the volume of consecutive natural numbers, then their difference can be expressed by the formula n to the third power minus n minus 1 to the third power. The system of cubes, entering one into another, is visible both in the ratio of the number of sacrificial bulls and rams prescribed to the Urartian gods, and in the sizes of the Urartian standard temples, in which the plan of the temple from above represents a system of 3 regular squares, entering one into another: the tabernacle, the temple, and the temple complex. And this geometrical system, the small inside the large, for the priests of Van represented a model of the universe, the structure of universe, or the structure of the ontological world. This is their pantheistic approach. All gods are also geometric bodies existing like in one another, and all of them in one whole, inside the supreme god Haldi. Here is another pattern. The prescribed number of all sacrificial rams, according to the inscription, is 318, and bulls 100. It turns out that ancient scientists used the number pi. They brought the number of sacrifices closer to the ratio of the diameter and perimeter of the circle, reducing the number of bulls by 10 times. Another example of a mathematical pattern. The total number of all rams and sheep being sacrificed is 353. Of these, 318 are rams. Another 35 are sheep for goddesses. So the total number is 353. If the circumference of the circle is 353, then the circumference of the square built inside the circle is approximately 318. Why are the numbers approximate? Because these numbers had to be rounded to whole numbers for the real sacrificing ritual. Otherwise, it is actually impossible to make sacrifices with irrational numbers.
After 403 BC, when the Athenians adopted the 24-letter Ionian alphabet, followed by revising and adjusting the sounding of the letters epsilon, eta, upsilon, and omega. And in the 4th century BC, a numerical value system was introduced for the letters and 3 more symbols were introduced. The names of the Greek gods began to be expressed also in numbers.
The number of the name of the Greek god Hermes is 353, which represents the total number of all rams and sheep in the inscription on Mher'S door. Helios's number is 318, which represents only the number of the sacrificial rams in the inscription on Mher'S door. If the circumference of the circle is 353, then the circumference of the square built inside it is approximately 318. The number of Apollo's name in Greek gematria is approximately 1060. In the inscription on Mher'S door, the total number of sacrifices of bulls and cows is 106, that is, reduced tenfold. The number of Zeus's name is 612. In the name god Haldi, it is prescribed to sacrifice 17 bulls. The sum of the numbers from 1 to 17 multiplied fourfold is 612, which is the number corresponding to the name of Zeus. And if we divide Apollo's number by root 3, we will obtain Zeus's number. Zeus's number divided by root 3 gives Hermes' number. The question that has to be answered is how these numbers of sacrifices of bulls and rams prescribed for Urartian gods appear in the Greek gematria 400 years later as numerical values of the names of Greek gods, and appear in the Bible later on as sacred and mystical numbers. I have presented only a few examples, but in the monumental cuneiform inscription Mher'S door, there are many mathematical patterns.
Contemporary Urartology believed that the inscription on Mher'S door is only about the sacrifice of bulls and rams for gods during ritual celebration in the month of Sun. However, the cuneiform inscription, the Door of Mher, contains a collection of mathematical, geometric, and, most importantly, astronomical knowledge of the Armenian priests. A deeper study of this inscription reveals that the scientist priests use both the golden ratio formula, the root 3, the pi number, Pythagorean formula centuries before he did, the formulas for arithmetic, geometric, and harmonic mean numbers in the ascending series of numbers, and the Fibonacci formula discovered in the 12th century, about 2,000 years before Leonardo of Pisa. As a matter of fact, it turns out that, in essence, the monumental inscription of Mher'S door represents the collection of knowledge of Urartian priests.
The sacred canon of Mher'S door was built during the reign of two Urartian kings, Ishpuini and Minua. And prior to preparing the cuneiform inscription on the Raven Rock, imagine the work of the priest scribes. Imagine the chronological measurements of time by constellations, and then imagine the appearance of priests in the royal palace where the text had to be confirmed by the king of the Van kingdom. In the ancient world, it was believed that gods are also heavenly luminaries, and this fact is clearly visible since the Sumerian times. The goddess Inanna was the planet Venera, god Haya was the constellation Aquarius, Ninurta was the planet Mercury, etc. This was the case also with the Greek system. Zeus was the planet Jupiter, Hermes was Mercury, Kronos was Saturn.
From the 60s of the 20th century until the first decade of the 21st century, astronomer-mathematicians Otto Neugebauer, van der Waerden, David Pingree, T.J. Young, Nobel Prize winner Bradley Elliott Schaeffer, and others have carefully examined the astronomical and mythological texts of both Egyptian, Greek, and especially the Mesopotamian Mul.Apin. These renowned mathematicians, astronomers, have found out which god represented which constellation or planet about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, which mostly match with the constellations representing the Urartian gods, since in the 2nd and 1st millennia BC, methods for measuring time and establishing chronology by constellations were widespread in the ancient world.
The gods mentioned in the monumental inscription named the Door of Mher are also constellations. Ancient scholars divided the starry heaven into 360 degrees and the ecliptic plane into 12 zones with 30 degrees each, and mapped the sky in accordance with constellations. For example, if the constellation Taurus would rise above the horizon in the morning in the east, then it would set 12 hours later in the west. In ancient times, the annual birth of God's constellations was defined by the heliacal rising, when the bright star of a particular constellation becomes visible in the east for the first time in the year, just before the sunrise. For example, Sirius will rise before the sunrise only once during the year. On the next day, Sirius will rise above the horizon 4 minutes earlier due to the sun's eastward shift along the ecliptic. This is how the ancient scholars measured the time and defined their calendar using this method of the heliacal rising of the constellations during the days and months of the year.
Astronomy was a way to measure the time and build a calendar in ancient times. Ancient astronomers measured time and created a 360-day schematic calendar based on the heliacal rising of the gods' constellations. This is called heliacal rising regulation, as attested by a Mesopotamian astronomical catalog named Mul.Apin that have come down to us. The sequence of the gods' constellations mentioned in the inscription of Mher'S door is also arranged in the order of heliacal rising, as are the 2nd and 4th astronomical catalogs of the Mesopotamian Mul.Apin and the Urartian pictogram, the Shield of Anzav, discovered in 1995.
In ancient times, the year began around the day of the vernal equinox, which allowed the calendar to be aligned with the 4 seasons. The new year began around March 21st, and since that day, with the heliacal rising of the god constellation over the horizon, the schematic year began. And the heliacal risings of the gods' constellations, fixing the beginning of the 4 seasons, were considered cardinals, the main gods. These were the gods' constellations, determining the days of the solstices and equinoxes. The shield discovered in the Anzav fortress in 1995 is truly exceptional. In the survived fragment of the shield, we can see the succession of gods seated on animals. In both the inscription on Mher'S door and in the pictogram of the shield of Anzav, the succession of gods is based on the order of rising by heliacal rising of gods' constellations. However, the gods' constellations defining the 4 seasons are removed from this row and placed in front of the row. While beginning with the 4th one, the Khutuini god, standing on the animal with the Scorpio tail, all gods' constellations are arranged in the order of their heliacal rising, like in the 2nd and 4th calendar lists of the Mesopotamian Mul.Apin. When the structure of the succession of gods in the inscription of Mher'S door becomes clear, the identities of the gods also become clear. For example, the identity of the supreme god of the pantheon, Haldi. Look, in the shield of Anzav, Haldi is depicted in the front, with Tesheba, Shivini, and Khutuini coming next, standing on animals. And they clearly indicate the constellations of Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. The Leo is the constellation defining the summer solstice, the Taurus, the spring equinox, and the Scorpio, the autumn equinox. Thus, if we have these 3 constellations indicating the beginning of the seasons, then Haldi is the constellation Aquarius, identifying the winter solstice. So, the identity of the god Haldi is clarified. He is the god Haya Ea, known since Sumerian times, who represents the constellation Aquarius. The gods' constellations Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio are the constellations defining the solstices and equinoxes of the year. But there is a problem here.
Here is the problem. For a viewer to see the constellations Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius rising above the horizon shortly before the sunrise in the Armenian highland on the days of winter and summer solstices, as well as spring and autumn equinoxes, he or she should have lived 6,000 to 4,000 years ago, in the 4th and 3rd millennia BC. However, the inscription on Mher'S door dates back to the 1st millennium BC. When, according to the precession pattern, the spring equinox begins not with the constellation Taurus, but with constellation Aries, the summer solstice with Cancer, the autumn equinox with Libra, and the winter solstice with Capricornus. Thus, the question that has to be answered is, why did the priests of the kingdom of Van consider Hald Aquarius, Tesheba Leo, Shivini Taurus, and Khutuini Scorpio as the 4 main deities?
The answer is very simple. In the Urartian times, the much older system of the hierarchy of gods was considered sacred, and they have inscribed the ancient sacred system on the Raven Rock. For example, even now, in the 21st century, we celebrate Christian holidays that correspond to the system existing 2,000 years ago. We celebrate Christmas, Easter, the revelation of Christ, etc. Even the Common Era, the year of 2024, is counted from the date of Christ's birth. This was the case in ancient times. The old system established 3,000 years before the Urartian times was considered sacred. Moreover, this sacred system has its reflection even in the Christian theology. In the book of Revelation, the description of the creatures standing in the 4 sides of the throne of God the Father, bull, lion, eagle, and man, is the system of constellations of equinoxes and solstices existing 5,000 to 6,000 years before us. And they chose the constellation of the vulture instead of Scorpio, which in the Urartian pantheon represents the Western Gate.
Ancient astronomers had created numerous tools. They measured the height and angle of luminaries from the horizon and determined the night hours. During the 10 hours of the day, they measured the length of the shadow of the stick and compared it with the water clock. For example, on the day of the summer solstice, at dawn when the shadow was becoming 1 cubit, it was equal to 2 berus of water. On the day of the winter solstice, 3 berus, and on the spring and autumn equinoxes, 2.30 berus. And the information about the application of these methods, as well as the methods of mathematical astronomy, are transferred to us from the Mesopotamian astronomical texts named Mul.Apin. The issue of measuring the time has always been a vital necessity. In the Armenian highland, the identities of the animals and important details depicted on huge stones in the temple complex of the 12,000-year-old archaeological site of Portasar, which is Göbekli Tepe, remind the pictures of constellations well known to us. In addition, mapping the sky by constellations according to the time zones probably begins its remembrances at the Armenian highland ever since the first agricultural revolution, approximately 12,000 years ago.
Representations of days, weeks, months, and years by symbols of bulls and rams exist both in Old Greek, Mesopotamian, and Vedic mythic narratives. As a result of examination of the numbers of sacrifices of rams and bulls prescribed for gods in the inscription on the Door of Mher, it became clear to me that 1 ram or 1 sheep prescribed for goddesses counted as 1 day, with the total number of 353 ram and sheep sacrifices representing the number of the days in the incomplete lunar year. And the bull or 1 cow prescribed for the goddesses is 1 draconic half year.
The paths of the moon and the sun have 2 nodes of intersection. The time of the transition of the sun from one node to another was called the draconic half year. And the time of returning to the same node, the draconic year. The solar and lunar eclipses occur near these nodes. The lunar nodes change signs every 18 months, backing up through the zodiac signs. Their full cycle through all constellations on the ecliptic takes about 18.6 years.
The year lasting 346 days, 14 hours, 53 minutes, and 54 seconds was called draconic since, according to the ancient religious mythic narratives, the invisible heavenly dragon, allegedly stretched from tail to head by the 2 nodes of the moon's orbit, attempts to swallow the sun, but the thunder god decapitates the dragon with his lightning weapon.
However, the decapitated dragon tries to unite its body and head and swallow the sun. And although it does not succeed, according to legend, it is for this reason that periodic solar eclipses occur. But the learned priests knew about the phenomenon of periodic eclipses and could predict it.
Even in the base of the image of the 2 royal Urartian helmets with 8 dragons represent the 8 draconic half years known under the name of Octon, which is a 4-year period, amounting to 1,386.48 days. In fact, the 8 dragons represent a draconic quadrennial and correspond to the periodicity of eclipses. This phenomenon was a means to adjust the calendar for learned priests. The calculation of time by 4 dragon years refers also to the information on the 6th century Greek Pythian games, Python means dragon, which took place once every 4 years. The games were held in honor of the god of sun, Apollo, who decapitated the dragon.
The lunar year is 354 days, 8 hours, 48 minutes, and 34 seconds. And the tropical year is 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds. This created complications for the ancient scholars in terms of compiling an accurate calendar. As the 1st century BC Greek astronomer Geminus states, since neither the month nor the solar year consists of a whole number of days, astronomers sought a period of time, which should include whole numbers of days, of months, and of years.
And that period was considered to be the draconic 4 years, since the number of the days both in draconic and the synodic months in that period are comparable. In other words, the number of the days in 51 draconic months and in 47 synodic months is actually the same, with a difference of only 2 hours and 45 minutes. This 4-year cycle was called octo, from the Greek word 8, because it represents 8 draconic half years.
Prior to the existence of the Greek system octon, the system with 8 draconic half years was definitely used in Urartu, since the helmet with 8 dragons of the Urartian kings Argis I and Zardur II that have come down to us are the bare witness of this.
The prescribed 100 bulls in the inscription, and with the repetition of the text, 200 bulls, are draconic half years and indicate the number of 100 draconic years, which consists of 25 octons. It turns out that the inscription on the Door of Mher represents a centennial ritual calendar, which is structured according to the periods of eclipses. This also suggests that the discovery of the Saros, the solar eclipse cycle, which is 18 tropical years and 11 days, is not of Mesopotamian or Greek, but Urartian origin, and dates back not to the 5th century BC, but at least the 9th century BC.
In the cuneiform inscription of the Door of Mher, with the repeated text, the total number of 212 sacrificial bulls and heifers implies 212 draconic half years, which in turn is equal to 106 draconic years, which are based on the draconic 4-year period, octon. It should be added that the number of days in 106 draconic years is equal to the number of days in 106 tenths of solar years. It turns out that the cuneiform on the Door of Mher is a 100-year ritual calendar, constructed on the basis of draconic 4-year periods. The presence of the eclipse cycle known as Saros is also evident in the inscription on the Door of Mher. The number of the sacrifices of 38 bulls and cows specified for the 6 main gods and their wives represents the cycle of the eclipse of Saros, the 38 draconic half years, that is, 19 draconic years.
And here is the secret of the total number of sacrificial bulls and heifers in the inscription on Mher'S door. 6 kids of goats brought as a burnt offering to the supreme deity Haldi as an idea of the whole are 53 draconic years, 18,371 days long. The text in the inscription on Mher'S door is exactly repeated twice. So, with the text repeated, 12 goat kids are 36,742 days, which is 106 draconic years. That is 212 draconic half years, which are presented in the inscription as the total number of sacrifices of 212 bulls and cows. Thus, we can state that the content and the semantic essence of the inscription on Mher'S door is revealed. This door of supreme deity Haldi is popularly called the Door of Mher because in the Armenian pagan religious epic Daredevils of Sassoon, which has come down to us through folklore, through oral transmission from generation to generation, the last deity, Maher Jr., whose parallel is the deity Mithra, by his own will, imprisons himself in the cliff Raven Stone and waits for the end of times to come out and destroy the unjust world. And Mher'S attempts to come out of Raven Cliff on the days of ascension is also related to the draconic annual cycle of the solar eclipse. And amazingly, in several narratives of the epic Daredevils of Sassoon that were written down and published prior to the reading of Urartian cuneiforms, Mher'S path is clearly shown exactly by the draconic years as written in this Urartian monumental inscription. According to several stories of the Daredevils of Sassoon epic, one instant of Mher Jr. inside the rock is 1/10 or 1/100th part of a second, which is 1 year of a human life. A journey of 40 days in one instant of Mher who attempts to come out of Ravenstone on ascension nights shows that Mher's 40 days are 34,560,000 terrestrial years. Therefore, his 12 hours are 432,000 years, which, according to Babylonian priest Berossus and Moses Korenatsi, are 120 shars, which is exactly the same as the epoch of Kali Yuga in the life of Brahma in the Vedic tradition. As a matter of fact, the parallel of the Urartian supreme Haldi deity, Mher Jr. appears in the Armenian epic also as a cosmic being like the cosmic being Brahma is in the Vedic worldview. Thus, the hidden Armenian sun worshippers from Moxoene were definitely aware of the content of this inscription and disseminated the name Door of Mher among the people.
This episode of the epic also says that the 100 years of little Mher's life are 311,040,000,000,000 terrestrial years, just like the number of the years of life of the cosmic being Brahma in the Vedic system. In fact, in the Armenian epic, Mher Jr. appears as a universe being, like the cosmic being Brahma is in the Indo-Aryan Vedic system. In the cuneiform inscription, the Door of Mher, the supreme god Haldi is presented in exactly the same pantheistic approach, but with the geometric structure, which has already been discussed.
According to Assyrian sources, in the kingdom of Van, the king of the country was crowned in the temple of Musasir, that is, Ardini. I believe the ceremony of coronation could be combined also with the cycle of solar eclipse. The royal helmets with 8 dragons of Argis I and Zardur II, and the mysticism God kills with his lightning weapon the dragon attempting to swallow the sun, suggest that it might have been staged as an act of bull sacrifice during the very ceremony of coronation, where the Urartian king acts as the one who performs the function of the bull sacrifice. Although the learned priests were well aware that the eclipses and their periodic nature were related to the positions of the sun, the moon, and the earth when they line up in one line, being near the nodes of the moon's orbit. However, the function of the bull sacrifice had a ritual mysticism.
Իսկ հիմա եկեք տեսնենք, թե ինչպես են
Now let's see how the names of the deities in the pantheon of the kingdom of Van actually sounded.
միայն
I will give a few examples.
Urartական աստվածների
The comparison of the Urartian gods with the constellations known in the ancient world gave us the opportunity to reveal the identities of the Urartian gods and their functional and figurative content. It is a well-known method and pattern that during the etymologization of the names of the deities, we need to make sure to take into account the semantic comparability of the functional and figurative content of a particular deity and the root word being compared. Naturally, this provision insists that the characters of the deities, the names of which are etymologized, should be sufficiently known to us.
When the structure of the sequence of gods in the inscription of the Door of Mher is already clear, and also it is clear that they are deities' constellations, in regard to the functional and contextual characters of which there is enough material in the Sumerian and Akkadian texts, then we can state that until now, the names of the Urartian gods have been read and sounded conditionally. So, now let's see how the names of the gods in the pantheon of the kingdom of Van actually sounded.
In the year 2000, linguist Vahan Sarkisyan read the cuneiform hald as hakt, which means great one, gigantic in Armenian.
Հալդ հաղթ աստվածությունը, ինչպես արդեն փաստեցինք, որպես
The deity Hald Hakt, as already stated, is the constellation Aquarius, which has defined the winter solstice in the 4th and 3rd millennia BC and is mostly referred to as Haya or Enki in Sumerian Akkadian texts. In all Mesopotamian star lists and astrolabe calendars, when the Haya deity appears as a constellation of Aquarius, then the nickname Gula is used for it, which means great one in Sumerian. Therefore, the stellar nickname of the main god of the Urartian pantheon should be read not as Kald or Hald, but Hakt, meaning great one in Armenian. And I believe the self-name of the Armenian ethnos is from the name of god Haya, since in ancient times, the self-name of any nation was derived from the main god of its pantheon, such as the Assyrian self-name Ashur. Moreover, according to Sumerian poem The Courtship of Inanna and Dumuzi, the deity Haya is the father of the god representing the constellation Dumuzi Orion, that is, the father of Armenian Haik Orion, presented by medieval Armenian chroniclers. Perhaps the stellar nickname Hakt of the god Haya has been preserved in the name of island in Lake Van, Akhtamar, meaning Lake of Hakt, where the Armenian word Mor is used in the meaning of lake, like the names of Metzamor Lake and Metzamor River, which is translated as Lake of the Great One and River of the Great One in Armenian.
The name of the next god of the Urartian pantheon, mentioned in the cuneiform inscription of the Door of Mher, was conventionally read as Tesheba, constellation Leo. This god is identified or generalized with Hurrio-Hittite Teshub, who was the god of the sky and thunder. In the pictographs of the Urartian Shield of the Cave, he is depicted standing on a lion with a bouquet of lightning in his hands, as a deity of thunder. According to Sumerologist Armen Davtyan, the name of this god from cuneiform writing should be phonetically transcribed as Desoy, which in Armenian means overseer, inspector. The Armenian word desnel, meaning to see, comes from the protoform dedas. In the list of ancient Armenian names of the hours of the day, the midday hour bears the name Yerkrates, which means overseer of the earth in Armenian.
Is there any epigraphic evidence in terms of the name of this god as a watcher or inspector? Yes, there is such a fact. In the Sumerian poem Enki and the World Order, the god Haya Enki passes on to his twin brother Ishkur, the same Teshub, that is, Tesheba, the destiny of being the god of thunder, and appoints him as an overseer, inspector of thunder, lightning, and the channels of heaven and earth. In the 4th and 3rd millennia BC, the summer solstice was defined by the constellation Leo. So, the name Tesuch, which in Armenian means overseer, also has an astronomical meaning. Shivini,
Աստղատունը
constellation
Ցուլ.
Taurus. According to Urartologist Sarkis Ayvazyan, if we take into account that the Urartian diphthong iu is represented in the ancient Armenian by the diphthong oi,
ունենում ենք Urartakan
then we have the correspondence of the Urartian Si-U-In, God of light sun, and the Armenian soy, light. In the Armenian dictionary, we have the root word soy, soik, which means light. This name of a deity should be read not as Shivini, but Si-U-Ni, that is, Siuni. And this interpretation is completely consistent with the pictograms that have come down to us, on which this god is depicted as a flying sun in a halo of solar rays. Probably, the toponym Sunik also has derived from the word soy, meaning light, and perhaps also from the name of this deity. In the shield of the cave Anzav, he is depicted standing on a bull. Taurus, as a constellation in the 4th millennium BC, determined the vernal equinox, when the hours of the day and the night become equal. Kutuini, constellation Scorpio. In the image of the shield of the cave Anzav, the deity standing on a mythological animal with the Scorpio tail and armed with 2 spears is the 4th in the row, as it is in the list on the inscription on Mher'S door. According to Armen Davtyan, the name of this god can be read also as Baktuni or Bakhtuni, the proto-form of which is Bak, to divide. The Scorpio Baktuni was the constellation defining the autumn equinox in the 4th and 3rd millennia BC and was dividing the year into 2 equal parts, which is related to the meaning of its name.
Turani. The ancient constellation is the goat, which today is known as Lyra. In the pictogram of the Urartian shield of Anzav, Turani is standing on a goat. The word tur is an original Armenian word and is used as the imperative form of the verb tal, to give, and as a noun it means a present, a gift. According to academician Mul.Apin's examination, in 9 of the 14 books of the history of Armenia by Coronation, in the case of the name of Armenian mythical hero Tork Angev, not the word Tork, but the word Turk Angev is used. In the Mesopotamian astronomical catalog Mul.Apin, the 2 stars located in the constellation of Goat, today's Lyra, appear as the bearers of the bronze dagger of the sacrificial ritual. This means that Turani Tork is the deity of the sacrificial ritual. In the 4th and 3rd millennia BC, the heliacal rising of the constellation Goat Lyra took place in September, which fully corresponds to the ceremony of roasting the goat of Subkhej in an earthen oven tonir during the Feast of Holy Cross among Armenians.
His name in the Urartian pantheon is Vah, which is the Armenian word Vah and Veh, which are synonyms of the word God in Armenian. Here we can see the family name of the Armenian priestly dynasty of Vahuni. In the pictogram of the shield of Anzav, this god is standing on the mythical creature panther vulture. In Mesopotamian texts, the constellation of this god is called exactly panther vulture. According to our interpretation of the data transferred by the 5th century historian Coronation, this god constellation corresponds to the god Vahagan. In the Armenian translation of the Bible by the first group of translators led by Mashtots, the name of the underworld ruler Nergal is translated as Anger. In fact, the deity Vahagan in the pantheon of the kingdom of Van appears by his own name and represents today's swan constellation, which was called Anger, which means vulture in Armenian. According to the Urartian pantheon, the wife of the god Vah is the goddess Sardi. The ideographic sign Sar 5 has the meaning of the deity Ishtar, which has given grounds to read the name of King Sardur Zardur as Ishtar Duri, and the goddess Ishtar represented the planet Venus, which the Armenians called a star, Astrik. Therefore, the goddess Astrik, who is mentioned by medieval Armenian chroniclers and who was Vahagan's lover, appears in the Urartian pantheon pantheon as his wife just by the name Zart Astach, meaning star. By the way, there is information on Vahagan's mother in a Sumerian text. She is called the Reed, which in Armenian sounds Yeregnik. As historian Coronation stated in the song The Birth of Vahagan, this goddess is called Garmir Yeregan, meaning red reed, which is a part of today's constellation Vela. Varuban. This is today's constellation of Virgo. In the texts of the Mesopotamian Mul.Apin, the stellar name Virgo represents a girl holding an ear of wheat. The ideogram grain was especially used when writing the name of the oldest Sumerian goddess, Nidaba, which means the one who distributes the grain. In Mesopotamian cuneiform texts, one of the stars of the constellation Virgo, the Spica star, is called Absin, meaning furrow, while in the star list of Mul.Apin we read, the star Absin is the ear of the wheat of the goddess Shala. The idea of the bearer of wheat ear of the constellation goddess Virgo continues in the Seleucid era, with the name of Spica star, which also means wheat ear in Greek. According to one of the Sumerian texts, the goddess of the wheat ear, Nidaba, is the wife of the water god Haya, just like Varuban is the wife of Haldi Haya, that is, Hakt, meaning the Great One, in the Urartian pantheon. This is why the meaning, the one who distributes barley, should be seen in the name Varuban. According to Armen Davtyan, Sumerian reveals the protoform of the Armenian word gari, var, that is, barley, which gives us the opportunity to etymologize the word. And it turns out that the name Varuban, that is, Garuban, is associated with the meaning distributing barley.
Baba, the eastern part of today's Pisces constellation. The Urartian goddess named Baba is related to the mother goddess seated in the middle of two lion cubs in Asia Minor, dated back to the 6th millennium BC, who later on was related to the goddess named Kubaba, Sumerian Kugba'u, meaning holy mountain, and even later with the goddess named Mother Kibela or Sibila, appearing in ancient pictograms with two lions. Why? Because when the constellation of this goddess rises in the east, the constellation Leo sets in the west, and vice versa. In the Urartian pantheon, this goddess Baba is the wife of the god Tesheba Tesoi, standing on a lion. According to Urartologist Sarkis Ayvazyan, there is the word Baban in Urartian and the word Babai in Armenian, both meaning a hill, and on this basis, the name of this goddess in the Urartian pantheon is Baba, Mount Goddess, like it is in Sumerian texts. In the astronomical catalogue of Mul.Apin, this goddess constellation was also called Anunit. According to the linguist academician Grigor Lapansian, the names Anunit and Anahit are versions of the name of the same goddess, and probably later on, Anunit came into circulation among Armenians as goddess Anahit.
When the names of the main gods in the pantheon are basically Armenian names, which are words that indicate functional content, then it means that the particular ethnos of the nation, in this case, the kingdom of Van, which is called Urartu, is the inseparable part of Armenian history and culture.
Եվ այսպիսով
Thus, Agravakar, raven stone, or the gate of the supreme god Haldi, which is popularly known as the Door of Mher, and the inscription on it, where the gods of the kingdom of Van and the procedure for sacrificing bulls and rams for them are presented, is exceptional and monumental. It is a ritual centennial calendar canon structured with draconic half-years that includes all the mathematical, geometrical, and astronomical knowledge of Armenian ancestors.
To the god Haldi, the Lord, Ishpuini, the son of Zarduri, and Minua, the son of Ishpuini, built this door and established an order. Make a feast in the month of the god of the sun. Let 6 goats be sacrificed to the god Haldi as a burnt offering. Let 17 bulls, 34 rams be sacrificed to the god. Let 6 bulls, 12 rams be sacrificed to the god Tesheta. Let 4 bulls, 8 rams be sacrificed to the god Shivini.